Guys, this is clearly the most important episode we've ever recorded. I've had the pleasure of meeting Bob Moesta in person and doing a workshop with him. Lorenzo's a voyeuristic fan of everything that Bob talks about. And, I don't even know how to introduce Bob Moesta, but I will say that, he has co-invented a way of thinking that I think is fundamentally disruptive. He is an innovator. I believe he's innovated or invented 3,500 products or been involved in the invention of a ridiculous number.
With, I mean, every product requires a lot of teamwork. So it's like, it's me and a bunch of people have done it, but I've been and had my fingers in or hands on over 3,500 different innovations over the last 40 years.
I mean, it's truly incredible. I actually really love the fact that, and I don't know if Bob, I'm sure Bob has mentioned this publicly, but he suffers from a form of dyslexia. So that's actually one of the bases on which I have the same affliction. One of the reasons why I'm focused on product pages is because my wife has been always very frustrated that I can never find stuff on a page. And I have this deep empathy for people that are like me, that struggle online. And so I figured out I'd focus on this. And Bob brings an interesting sensibility here. He's a prolific speaker. And he has controversial views on A/B testing, which we actually find quite exciting. And we actually agree with what he's saying. So this is going to be really fun. So Lorenzo,
let's just be clear. I'm a regular guy. I just, I walk to work, I'm just, I have lunch, like, let's just be real. Like I've just got a lot of reps. I've got a lot of reps. And with a lot of reps, I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've learned way more. And so the whole thing for me is it's all about, I want to, and the interesting part is just at a conference where people talk about failing. And I'm like, I either fail every moment of every day, or I never fail because I'm learning. And I've taken the view that like, look, I don't fail, I learn. And the biggest crime is if you fail from something and you don't learn from it, you're just going to repeat it. And so for me, that's really what I'm an old experienced man at this point. Sorry. I'm almost 60. So I'm to the point where I'm like, now I got to start paying it forward. So thank you guys for having me on. I'm really excited to be here and be able to help. And though I might be controversial, it's more like, to be honest, I'm hoping you guys, as we go through this, I can learn more about what our conflict is on A/B testing, and at the same time, maybe articulate or learn to articulate better kind of what I mean by why I don't like A/B testing.
Totally.
No, absolutely. And Lorenzo, please go ahead.
No, I would, totally. I'm actually excited about this topic as well. So we have a lot of people actually requesting to talk about jobs to be done.
Yes.
And Rish and I didn't want to talk about jobs to be done. And
why?
we thought about inviting you to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm more than happy, but why wouldn't you talk about it? You guys know it very well.
Yeah, but it's like, like I would rather have the inventor of the jobs to be done talk about it. Do you want to talk briefly about like the main elements of the jobs?
The basic premise is this: is that people really don't buy products; they hire them to make progress in their life. And so, like, if I have Tide and I'm out of Tide, right? The fact is, I'm just going to rebuy Tide. But what's the day where I actually say, like, I don't want to buy Tide anymore; I want to buy something else? And so it starts with a struggling moment. It starts with basically, so there's the aspect of restocking, and I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about when people decide to do something new. So like if you're building a new product that nobody's had before, you have to understand it's not about, I'll say, the consistency of your product. It's about what would cause somebody to say, today's the day I'm going to stop using that product and start using your product, or stop doing nothing and start doing something. And so ultimately, when you look at it from that view, and you're looking at it through the customer's eyes, so you're trying to see what they see, feel what they feel, do what they do, and you start to realize, like, at some point, their view is so different from our view from the product side or from the marketing side. And so we end up really being able to empathize with people, and we start to realize competition is very, very different from their point of view, and that, like, the greatest competitor to a new mattress is a bottle of ZzzQuil, not Serta, Simmons, Casper, or Helix, because they're not even there yet. And so part of this is to understand how people buy, not how should we sell. And so to me, part of this is that once I actually understand what is the struggling moment, what's the context somebody's in, because context creates value, and then what are the outcomes they're seeking. To be honest, it makes it actually really simple to build product and to build marketing and to build copy and to find partnerships. But most people build it and then they try to find, of the 8 billion people in the world, find people who want it. And to me, that's like, that's like a needle in a haystack mentality, where me is I'm trying to focus on really big struggling moments and then basically figure out how to build a product to fit into those people's lives.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because I remember when I listened to you talking about the real competition, what real competition looks like in the eyes of the customer versus in the eyes of the company. Even from like a positioning standpoint, for example, in a product page, right? It's a completely different approach. How did you come across this thinking of what really competition looks like in the eye of the customer?
So it started like back in the 80s, to be honest. I was I was an intern for Dr. Deming, and he introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Mr. Fukuhara, who had a set of methods called quality function deployment. And it was talking about taking the voice of the customer and translating it down to what do we do on the line that makes sure we assure that we deliver on what the customer wants. And one of the things that they talk about is weighting of what's more important or less important than something else. And when we started to gather the voice of the customer, it was like they were averaging and abstracting everything up to easy and fast and fun, and like these things that are like, okay, I get it, but the reality is like, I got to create it. So what do they mean by that? And it turns out there's like, 22 different definitions of easy. And if you don't unpack things down to the right level, like you don't actually know what to go build. And so for me, the market research that I used to get was just so confusing that I would just go like, let me go just talk to a few people who are, who are in the space or have done something or are trying to do something. Like, how do I go find that? So like, I feel like the way I say it is the anomalies of the past hold the DNA for the future. And so by looking and talking to people about what it was, and I found out context. In one context, they valued things one way. In another context, they valued something a different way. And so it turned out the first thing that blew apart was all the notion of people segmentation. Right. So everybody segments by people, like demographics and psychographics, but turns out what causes people to switch usually is more about their context than who they are. And so that's really kind of where a lot of this beginning came to say, like, how do I actually bring the notion of where, when, and why into the voice of the customer of when they say what they want, right? I think the second part of it was that in Japan, they had this whole notion of how do we actually create technology agnostic requirements, so I can actually come up with several different ways to do it, as opposed to like describe the requirements of the customer through the technology that we're using. So like if I talk about door closing effort, and they'd say, I want it easy to close the door, and I use that, then it's really about, I have to have a door. But if you say, I want to make it easy to get in and out of, there might be 50 different ways I can do that. And so it's this notion of being able to stay at the customer level, because at some point, when you start to look at competition, there's industrial competition, or what I call supply side competition, where it's all the people in the industry and industry structure. But there's demand side competition, which is what the customer looks at, and you start to realize that competition is way varied than what we think it is.
Yeah, one of my favorite examples of what the real competition looks like is from the founder of Netflix, CEO founder, I can't remember, where he talks about the fact that Netflix is actually competing with sleep, and it's something that I've never thought about. And then going deep, like I kind of like analyze myself, kind of like looked at why I would watch a Netflix show. And I started to think, wow, like, the Netflix show competes against like going out for dinner with a friend, or going out for drinks, or playing a video game, or reading a book, and so on. And that, like my job as a conversion rate optimization consultant, that allows me to, even like from a positioning standpoint on a product page, to position the product of my client in a different way. Right. Thinking about more what competition really is versus.
That's right. that's why I think TAM, total addressable market, is kind of a fallacy, because it's kind of like, well, how big is the total addressable market? And they're like, well, there's 8 million businesses that fit in this realm that are looking for these kinds of things. And you're like, okay, there's 8 million, but how many are really struggling? Right. And are there people who are struggling that aren't like, we think of it as people as the total addressable market, but it's actually moments. How do we actually find the moments where people struggle? And what you start to realize is when you find those struggling moments, they actually are way more and way wider than any one demographic group.
Yeah, I have a question around these moments, because a way for you to unpack those moments is through customer interviews, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Because most of them don't even know why they bought what they bought. That's the funniest part. Is like, I bought a new car. Well, I got it. It's got great gas mileage, and I got a deal on it. Like, that has nothing to do with really why they bought. It's like the old car had 80,000 miles on it. We had 2 big repairs in the last month. Like, there's all these other things that are wrapped around it, but it's like the gas mileage and the deal are the things that is almost like the lie they tell themselves of why they bought it. And so we have to move. I talk about this notion of the layers of language, and that there's a pablum layer where it's almost like it's like universally accepted. Like, oh, you got a deal. That's great. It's like, oh, okay. But the notion is like, what's a deal? Did you get so much off, or was it like lower than the market? Like, what is deal to you? Right. And you start to realize that everybody actually has their own definition of a deal, but we can all agree that like, it's good to get a good deal. But his definition of a good deal or her definition of a good deal is very different than my definition of a good deal. And so this is where you got to unpack past the pablum layer, past the fantasy nightmare layer, down to the causal layer. What caused it to be a deal for them? And when you get to that layer, now you actually are at a point where you can start to connect dots. And so I learned a lot of that through criminal and intelligence interrogation. But like the best way to learn it, I would say, is through this book. Right, and here, I'll just put it here, is this notion of Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. He's kind of amazing. Like, I had started pulling together my notes to do like, I got to teach people how to interview. And then I saw this book. I'm like, just read it. Like all the mirroring techniques, the playback, the notion of pausing, all the different techniques of how to negotiate is literally in this. And and I'm just trying to figure out why they did what they did. This is where we struggle with the fact that, we think we know, right? I always call jobs to be done like hypothesis building research. So like most people say, oh, well, I know why somebody bought a mattress, or I know why somebody bought a CRM. And in the end, we usually are doing research to validate our hypotheses. But I'm growing up dyslexic and always getting a D. I realized like at some point I didn't know. And even when I thought I knew, I was always wrong. And so this is the research I do to go like, what really happened? What really caused them? What's really going on? And it's this beginner's mind that I have, that even though I might have heard 100 interviews before of the same thing, I'm like, their story's different. What is going on with them? And it's not just functional, but it's functional, social, and emotional components that go into this causation. Sorry,
yeah,
I'm rambling. I hope I'm not going too far, too deep.
No.
Stop me.
No, it's interesting because you're talking about the beginning mindset, and to me, like it's not easy to put the ego on the side and say, I even though I've been an expert in X topic, I'm putting that ego on the side and going back to like day one and pretend that I don't have that and try to discover more.
So I'm working on I've got a couple new books, but one of them is basically the 5 lies I tell myself to help me be productive. And one of them is this whole aspect of like, there is way more unknown than there is known in the world. And don't ever fool myself. Dr. Taguchi used to tell me that all the time. And so even though I would have worked on something in the past, within 3 days, things might have changed. And we make so many assumptions that we have universal truths, but the reality is like, these are very complicated things. These are very complex things, and they're not predictable. But if you actually can boil it down to in a certain paradigm, and that's really what I'm trying to get to, like when this and this and this happen, I know that they're going to buy a mattress. Or when that and that and that happen, I know that they're going to actually quit and go find a new job. And what you start to realize is it's not one thing, but I'm a math guy mostly. And so you start to realize it's set theory. It's what are the sets of things that have to happen in people's lives to make them value what I'm bringing to the table. And most of the time, most people think we can convince people of our value, but they convince themselves. And it's more likely to find I would say context creates value, because at some point in time, I ask people, do you like steak or do you like pizza? And people go, I like both. I said, all right, well, let's talk about the last pizza situation. And they're like, oh, it's like, my kids, and I try to, get them home from hockey to basically eat so they can do their homework and get ready and do all that other stuff. And it's like, okay, well, what if I put steak in that situation? Well, steak would be so great. And so you start to realize context creates as much value as the product, and knowing what that is. And that's where, like, how do I find those moments, space and time where, like I say, who, when, where, and why, so I can figure out what, how, and how much. The what, how, and how much is my product.
Bob, I'm going to ask you a question.
Sorry, I'm just laying it. I'm like dropping
no,
this
is
I love it with a fire hose. So people might have to listen to it 3 times. So I apologize.
This is good. And one of the things that I've heard so many of your interviews, I know Lorenzo has as well. And I know that you get asked the same set of questions oftentimes. And I actually want to create new content, that things that you've never actually talked about before.
I love that. So I need that. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you one dumb question.
No dumb questions.
Did you say your mentor was Dr. Taguchi? Am I pronouncing it correct? Dr.
Yeah,
Taguchi?
Dr. Taguchi. Yep. So I have 4 mentors. I just wrote a book about it called Learning to Build. And these are the 4, and these are paintings I've done of them, and they sit in my office. So if I go over here, you can see me. This is my office here.
Wow.
And so but they're above the whiteboard, and they're looking down at me at all times. They remind me like how to think. They remind me like, oh, what would Clay think about in this situation? What would Deming say about this? What would Taguchi say about this? So I made sure that my mentors were with me, though they're all past. I feel like they're with me all the time, and that I'm constantly bouncing my situations against their wise words to me. And so
let me ask you I have 2 controversial questions. My first question is, what is one thing you disagree? So philosophically, because Dr. Taguchi had a journey, obviously, and you've come up with this jobs to be done. What is the one thing that doesn't reconcile between what you strongly believe in and what he may not have believed in?
Oh, that's interesting. He was such a wise man. I think one of the things where the methods that he built, he felt were very much, he would always say an engineer is not a scientist, right? And he would say an engineer is not an economist, and an engineer is not a psychologist, but they actually have to work in all 3. And what I would say is that the tools that he built and the thinking of how to frame things is universally applicable beyond engineers. And he would always say no, these are for people who want to build things. But my belief is that even building art is the same thing as building something technical. And he would say that this was really trying to stay in the realm of physics and science. And what I've learned is that this can actually go way beyond those kinds of things. And so it's not that I'm in a disagreement with them, but I would say it's more like he was humbled to basically say it was in this domain. And what I would say is I believe that it's actually in a more universal domain.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm going to ask you one quick question as well. Again, this might really annoy you, and I don't mean to annoy you, but I am a marketer.
Annoys me. It's impossible. It's virtually impossible. So
Lorenzo and I are marketers, and you used a very interesting word, that the word context. The word context means a lot to you. I'm going to ask you a controversial question. As a marketer, can I influence context? You talked about
absolutely.
Huh? Oh, you can.
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
So here's the thing: is that if you think about it, so Clay would always say that questions create spaces in the brain for solutions to fall into. And the problem is that most marketers ask a question and they don't wait for people to answer it. They just then say, "Oh, how did you sleep last night?" And they'll say, "Oh, you need a mattress," as opposed to letting that question fester in their stomach to go "I don't know how I slept, not that good. I should." What are you going to do about it? They're not helping people come through the journey of actually the struggling moment. And so part of marketing's job is to actually help people, one, identify their struggling moments, but also to learn about the problem and to articulate whether they should be doing something about that problem or not now. And so most of the time they're running to products so fast that they're so late in the cycle that really good marketers are actually doing marketing that create, Clay would say, questions create spaces in the brain for solutions to fall into. And so it's like, how do we actually help people create the space so they can go like, oh yeah, my job really sucks. You know what? I think I need a new job. A lot of people think it, but they don't know how to do it next. And the other part is they make it such a big leap. And so you start to realize you've got to be able to count on people to fester. That's why I don't really believe in the funnel, because I think the funnel itself is, we assume the only way out of a funnel is down and out. Right. But in real life, what happens is I might get to a certain point where I'm like actively looking, and then something happens and I have to go back to passive looking. People go backwards. So I saw a stat this week. I was at a conference and they basically said something effective like 60% of proposals, over 60% of proposals that are given end with no action. And most of it is because they can't make the trade-offs to take the action. And so the other part of marketing's job is to actually help identify, look, you can do it. Like ideally you'd love this, but this doesn't exist. Do you want it this way or do you want it that way? And ultimately helping people frame, and to be honest, I think this is more of sales' responsibility, but like if we're doing self-service, it's still then a marketing responsibility to help people weigh the options so they can choose, right? And this is the other part is, I say choose, but most people don't choose. They eliminate. So you give them three things and they look at all three. And the first thing is the way I work it is I try to make sure that there's one of those three I know that they don't want, but I still offer it. And people go like, why would you do that? Because within 10 seconds of showing them the three options, they're going to go, yep, this one's out. They throw this one out. And then they're left with two. And most people go, well, they look between the two. It's like, no, what they do is they just actually got endorphins from making a decision of what's out. So they compare the things that are left to the things that was out. And then they eliminate the next one. And so they're actually left with this one, but they didn't pick that one. They actually just eliminated the two. And so more people know what they don't want than what they want. If I ask people what easy is, it's like, well, you know, easy is like this or that. And you say, what's hard? And they can give me like really tangible things that are hard. And so this is where you've got to understand most people don't know what they want next or what they're even looking for, but they can tell you why they're looking for it or the negative of it.
So one question I have in relation to this, you know, something you said earlier about like marketers should be focusing on learning more rather than going for their sales right away. And my feeling here is that a lot of the reason why to go for the sales is because that's their KPI, right? Either coming from sales or coming from marketing, right?
Don't get me started on metrics.
What's your thought? Like, do you think companies should start incentivizing for learning more on the top of the sales incentive?
So the way Clay and I would talk about it would be is that measurement is a really, really important but difficult thing to do. Mm-hmm. And most of the time we measure what's easy and then try to connect it to what's meaningful. And so we end up with 20 metrics as opposed to finding the metric that actually, if we do that, everything else comes with it. And so I believe that to be honest, the way it's set up now is that marketing, the metrics that we have put marketing and sales at odds, because at some point marketing saying, well, I need to generate more leads, and sales going like, no, I need to stop wasting my time. I need better leads. And so what happens is nobody agrees on how to do that. And what happens is the funnel causes us to actually generate more, but not necessarily move people through. And now it's just passing more work to sales. So like when I built houses, Chris Speck was the technology guy with us. And he would always say like, we want to go from 1,000 leads to 2,000 leads. I'm like, no, I want to go from 1,000 leads to 200 leads, because 1,000 leads, I might close 20 homes. But if I could qualify them better through the process and get them thinking about it, I'd rather have 200 leads. And it turns out I would get to 200 leads and close 80 houses. And so part of this is that most people always think more is better. And that's one of the things, again, Tukaguchi taught me and Deming, that it's not about more or about less. It's about when is too much and when is too little, and knowing where targets should be. But so the notion of learning is it depends on the progress they're trying to make. Some people want to learn. Some people just want you to do it. And so part of it is it depends on kind of what they're, again, the context they're in. So this is where I don't think there's a universal answer. The thing I will say is context is probably the central most important thing for what I'm trying to do. Like what I'm building, like I make sure that I understand the context like extremely well because it just helps me understand what not to do.
Cool. I want to shift gears a little bit. So I was listening to one of your podcasts on Jobs to Be Done radio, and there was this episode about the jobs to be done of a contact us page.
Oh yeah.
And I thought it was very, very interesting. I've never thought about thinking about the jobs to be done of a specific page of an e-commerce, for example, or whatever website.
Yeah.
Rish and I do a lot of analysis of product pages. So my question, I guess, is what do you think is the jobs to be done of a product page?
So this is where and I would say this was a while ago. So this is probably 2012, 2013, something like that. And a gentleman I've worked with for a long time, probably 20 years. His name is Irvin Folks. He's now at Autobooks. He's an amazing gentleman. But we're in the middle of designing the website, and it's not really the job of the page, but more like, so to me, jobs is really about the most meaningful level of conversation or framing that the customer has. So they won't frame the job of a page. And what I would say is as the engineer, I need to say, what's the function of this page and what is it supposed to do to help people make that progress? So think of it as like, what's the tasks that we need to do to help them do their job? At the same time, we called it the job of the page, but it's really about, like, at some point when people are really interested to reach out, what's so amazing is when you actually ask people about there's so much anxiety, like, okay, like if I say, contact us, right? And again, there's some norms and universality that's come with it, but like contact us, like what's the next page you're going to see? And it's like, well, and Irvin at the time just literally copied and pasted a standard, contact us set of information. And he's like, we got to have this. And he made everything required. I'm like, why do we need that required? And do they really want to like contact? I mean, that doesn't fit who we are. And so I went into this long heated diatribe around the aspect of like, have them drop us a line, have them, just, reach out, like something that's more conversational about how they use it, as opposed to like, where's the contact us page? Like the thing is it's a very, like, technically it is contacting us, but how do they talk about it? How do they see that page? And so what was interesting is, like, the first thing is well, it's going to go right into a form. And then it's like, well, what's going to happen next? Well, you're going to push submit. Well, what does that mean? Is it going to send it to me, or like, what am I going to get something back? Like, if you think about all the anxiety around that whole process of reaching out, it's like, and being able to like make it less formal. And to be honest, when we switched it from contact us to drop us a line, I think it was, it's like we doubled or tripled the number of contacts. And it just made it less formal, like, hey, drop us a line, like, set up a call. And it was one of those things where people were way more comfortable because they knew what was next. A lot of times we know what's next, but they don't, and we don't take their eyes and their ears and what they see or feel into account as they're going through it. So we almost assume we know everything that's going on. This is why you brought up earlier, I talked about the beginner's mind, but the beginner's mind is really, really important. So I talk about this as empathetic perspective. Can you take somebody else's perspective and forget yours while you're in that moment? And really good entrepreneurs and innovators can do that.
And marketers.
Yeah, and marketers. Yes, I'm sorry.
And good salespeople.
I think the notion is people who are interested in helping other people get this, but people who are interested in just pushing their product, like I was talking with a company the other day, and it's like they want to just focus on people buying their product. And I'm like, look, if they buy your product and don't use it, they won't keep buying it. You got to understand, you got to help them make the progress. Buying your product is like the commitment to make the progress. But if they buy it and don't use it, at some point in time, they're going to learn that like this doesn't work for them. And it's not that the product doesn't work. They just don't know how to do it.
Yeah, which brings up the topic of consumption that you talk about all the time.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what do you mean by consumption? And
I feel like I've been neglecting this, and it's like I've been over indexing, if you will, on the big hire, but we talk about the little hire as the way in which people really make progress. So what the notion is, a big hire is like when you buy a bottle of Windex, and a little hire is when you spray the bottle of Windex. And so part of this is to understand, when are people actually making the progress? Because they don't make progress when they buy the bottle. They make progress when they spray the bottle. And so part of it is what I learned very early on is I designed and built most of my products in the early days around helping the individuals make progress, like in the spraying. How do you clean the windows kind of thing? But what I realized is I spent all my money doing that, and I didn't have any way to convince people or to talk to people about how to buy the bottle. And so it's a balance between understanding the big hire and the little hire. And especially in B2B, the person who does the big hire, the VP of sales for a CRM system, is different than a salesperson trying to use the CRM. And so you start to realize there's these differences between that, and that we have to actually know both. And I feel like most people are pretty strong in this notion of better user experience. And so that's why I've been over indexing, but it's the same notion of like, can I use this frame of what progress are they trying to make? What are the things that are in their way? What's the friction behind it? And being able to understand how they really make progress and how do they measure progress, right? So I think consumption is I have to start spending some more. I have to swing the pendulum back a little bit more towards the consumption side, because I feel like it's getting overlooked, where people are selling things, but they're not people using them per se. Well, I think one of the other things, just to bring it up around context, is that I have a saying that, sometimes you're the mustard and not the sandwich. And most people hate that, because the way they think about their product is like the center of the plate, and it's the thing. But when you actually look at the bigger thing, their life, you're literally the mustard on this bigger thing that actually make it the best sandwich in the world. But you're not the meat, you're not the bread, you're not the lettuce, you're not the tomato, but the mustard is that makes this the awesome sandwich. And so a lot of times, helping people see where they sit and the role that they play, as opposed to trying to make themselves bigger than what they are.
Cool. Rishi?
Yeah, I think, I was just thinking about something, Bob. One of the things that is interesting, and I think I want to actually get into your views on A/B testing, because I think it's a very valid topic. But I was, one of the things when I think about resource allocation, one of the things that I think about is I almost think that it really all comes down to resource allocation. If the CEO, the founder, isn't appropriately allocating resources, because the thing that I know about jobs to be done, and maybe I'm somewhat wrong about this, is that it's time consuming. It requires an investment of time and effort, whereas an A/B test can be whipped up together fairly quickly. Yep. So it seems like it's a better ROI. Just because of how quickly you can do it. Do you think that's one of the reasons why? I mean, do you think that's one of the reasons why jobs to be done is hard?
Well, it is hard. So one is there's just no question it's hard. But the reality is I think when easy runs out and you can't get any farther with easy, what do you do next? Right? Yep. I think the bigger thing is that it's really, A/B testing is one of those things where well, let me go back to your statement. It's about resource allocation. So I have a very different view on resource allocation. I think of it not as resource allocation. I think about it as bets, because resource allocation almost assumes I'm going to put the money there and I'm going to get the outcome I want. And so now it's almost like I'm figuring out where to put the money based on it happening. But when you're building product, there's a lot of stuff you do that doesn't work, or that you need more. And so part of it is to actually think about it, like, what bets am I going to really make? And how do I de-risk the bet, as opposed to making an accounting exercise of like, if I spend this money, I'm going to get this result. Because if we're really innovating, if we're really doing something new, we should not know. There's way more unknowns than there are knowns. And so I don't think about resource allocation. I think it is about, what's your betting strategy? How are you betting to grow the business? And what are the bets you need to make? And sometimes there's small bets you have to make, and sometimes there have to be big bets you have to make, or maybe I can take big bets and make them small bets. But trying to look at it as reserving capacity and being able to talk about, pushing the team to say, like, this is more unknown. And if it's more unknown, then I actually have to reserve time or space for them to actually discover tasks as opposed to imagined tasks.
It's like portfolio allocation and analysis and strategy.
That's right. And it's also about like if I just put a team on two really big things, I might actually want to make a small bet that's easy for them to do to get them to rest because I got another big bet coming. And so part of this is this is where like the roadmap, I don't necessarily, I believe the roadmap is for investors and it's for kind of, direction. But at the same time, the fact is to literally have a roadmap to tell you what I'm going to do in next June, when context is going to change dramatically by then. Like I'm making a promise that I'm going to have to break anyways. And so I'd rather talk about direction. And what we do is we talk about the next 90 days is like, here's what we're going to go build in the next 90 days. But after 90 days, here's the struggling moments we're going to go after. And we're going to figure out how we're going to go after them, like when we get there. But we're reserving capacity and making a bet that in this struggling moment space, as opposed to this feature. It's as you point out, it's a very different perspective, and it's not normal, and it's not. But the A/B testing is the same kind of thing where, like, it's more the way I would describe it. PTSD for me is that when I did A/B testing, I could build this thing to get it like improved by 200%, and then I would change one thing and it would be back to zero. I'd be like, wait, what just happened? And so part of it would be is that I didn't understand what caused it to be better. I just knew what was better. And so it's almost like dealing with the outcomes without understanding the causation to get to the outcomes. And that something that makes it better is one thing, but even knowing something that makes it worse is equally as valuable a learning. And most people don't value kind of the failures or the mistakes. And to me, I learned to use designed experiments at 18 years old. And to be honest, by learning this tool, I was able to go in and solve as an intern, I solved a $120 million problem that people had been working on for 3 years, but they were all doing one factor at a time or A/B testing. And as a complete having no expertise, to be honest, no knowledge in the space, but walking in and framing it the right way, and then it's almost let the system tell me what's the best for the system, as opposed to hypothesizing what's best for the system. And so that's why I'm not a big fan. It's like I've gotten burned too many times by A/B testing of, I might make it better today and I might make it better tomorrow, but I'm one change away from destroying the whole thing. And I don't know, did you guys have similar experiences, or is that not true?
Well, now you're talking about like the quantitative aspect of the results of A/B test.
Yes.
What about like, just test to learn something? You were talking about causality. What if the test is about causality, like understanding?
But doing two things doesn't give me enough understanding of whether it has an effect. And if you look at something called an orthogonal array, I'm actually going to run it 4 times one way and 4 times another way, so I can actually see how well it changes with respect to everything else changing. So it's a way better representation of, does this have an effect or not? And so instead of isolating things, I add variables and change them all simultaneously, but in a very, very structured way. And to be honest, I actually don't even know how it's going to turn out. So it's this notion of like, so I was working on pickles, right? Some pickles the other day, like for a very large consumer packaged goods company. It's like, percentage of vinegar, how much salt goes in it, whether, how long it sits in the brine, basically the amount of sugar that goes in it, the chill temperature by which I cut the pickles, like all these things are things they can change. But how does that affect ultimately customer preference? And so most people are changing one thing at a time, but it turns out when they're interdependent on each other, like the interesting part is when I take sugar away, it tastes more salty, right? Most people think the only way to make it make it more salty is to actually add salt, and it's actually wrong. And so you start to realize all these different aspects of like what seem obvious and simple are actually not simple, they're complicated. And so the systems that we have, we're down to systems that are very, even making pickles is a complicated process. And at some point in time, we were able to actually improve customer liking by almost 30% and reduce the cost and the time, cost by what, 17%, and improve the speed by almost having the time to make it.
Bob, I'm gonna actually add something here. I think you'll find it quite interesting. I want to kind of add this. I think Lorenzo and my approach to optimizing product pages, I think, is very different from what typically happens. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to actually quickly share something very interesting. It's a thought experiment. I know you love thought
Yeah,
experiments.
fine. That's fine.
So here's the thought experiment.
Well, and what I'll say is if it doesn't work, we can always cut it out. But I would say like, what the heck?
No. Yeah, exactly right. So one of the, basically what I think it's interesting. It's almost like your way of looking at something is actually very similar to kind of our way of looking at. That's why we're so drawn to you, even though you applied a different tool set. So we're kind of like, we share DNA, but we're different still.
Yep.
So I'll share with you a very interesting thought experiment that Lorenzo and I think about a lot. And I'd be curious to know if you've ever thought about this. If you go to the Casper, if you're searching for a mattress, you go to the Casper product page. Now, one of the things that's really interesting is that product pages are laid out in a specific way. There's an image, there's a title, there's price, there's reviews, there's a description. What's interesting though, is that if someone else went to that exact same product page, they would see the exact same description. And if your wife went to that product page through an email on her phone, she would see the mobile version of that exact same description. And one of the things that Lorenzo and I have always thought about is we love the retail store analogy. We think that online marketers think too much about online experiences, not realizing that these same human beings are in retail stores. So why should we learn from the retail store experience?
But the thing is most people like think of it this way, is like they're almost not like, let's be clear, one thing, if they're very sure of what they want, 9 times out of 10, it's they're restocking. My tide's out, I know what I want, click, buy, done. Like that's habitual buying. And that's not what we're talking about.
No, we're talking about switching.
We're talking about when people are going to buy something new for the first time. And that's where real growth comes from.
That's right. So if you think about the retail store, a good salesperson, you walk into a retail store, and what a good salesperson will do is engage you in a conversation. And in that conversation, the salesperson is trying to actually understand your context. Is your wife shopping in the store next door and you're just killing time? Or do you have a severe, like, how painful is this problem for you? How many brands are you looking at? What is your price sensitivity? And they will engage you in this. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me just pause you. Here's the crazy part, right? Nobody is randomly going anywhere. So this is one of the underlying principles I have, is like, there is nothing random. Random is like, it's the Deming, Taguchi would both say, thinking things are random is lazy. It's just a way we capture all the things we can't explain and say, well, it's random. But the moment you actually accept that something's random, all you can do is wait. But that person walking into the mattress store for the very first time, like, look, he could walk in, sit down in a chair, they don't have to come in. But if they're coming in, like, why are they, like, what's going on? Like, at some point, nobody randomly walks into a store, a mattress, like, especially a mattress store, for sure.
That's right. But a good salesperson will be able to have that conversation and put Bob in a different bucket versus me. But product pages are dumb. They have the same description for everyone. And that's one of the things that we've been thinking about.
That's right. That's why if you compare, Casper's website to basically Helix's website, very, very different.
Yeah.
Right. Casper's website is going to talk to you about features and benefits. And the interesting part is they just introduced all this lingo about, technology and whatever. And it's like, I don't I don't really want to know that much. I just literally, like, I need a new mattress and let me tell you what's going on so I know how to figure out. But they're giving me all these words and features I got to connect to, like like cooling. Like, what do I need cooling for? It's like, and ultimately, if you're waking up in the middle of the night and you're sticking your leg out, it's like, oh yeah, you probably need cooling. Oh, I get that. But the notion is like, do I need it? I don't know how to, like, they don't know how to connect the dots on those things. And what happens is everybody copies everybody else. But Helix starts with, let us help you find the best mattress for you. And by doing that, and everybody's like, oh, it's a questionnaire. Now, I know that most marketers hate questionnaire because it doesn't get you to, to conversion fast. But the notion is what it is it's actually creating the space in the brain for them to actually fit a solution into. And so the questionnaire is like, so what we did is we actually added a questionnaire in house buying, and our traffic went down. But what was interesting is people would abandon, but they'd come back because they couldn't answer the question. And when they could answer the question, then they come back. And so by the time they were actually walked through the entire process, they were ready to buy. And so, to be honest, I was able to actually grow without I actually have my sales staff, and I almost quadrupled sales. right?
I
Because
think Bob, I think one of the things that is unique about your approach, and it totally makes sense now, is that you're actually looking at this much more holistically. And I think what happens is that a lot of teams have been, the marketing, the growth marketing team is focused on this one part of the funnel. So for them, they convince themselves that anything good happens in that part must be because of them, not realizing there's a bigger context here. And there are other things that could be happening that could be affecting that. And I think it's shifting their focus. We're so focused on numbers, but to your point, not everything can be measured. So like in this questionnaire, people left your questionnaire and then they came back to this questionnaire. But they made more progress because the questionnaire was designed for progress and not for completion of questionnaire.
It's like last click attribution. That
Correct.
the product page is the last click attribution, but it's not.
It's not. That's the point. The point is if you can empathetically look through their eyes, it's like, God, that's a really good question. It's making me uncomfortable. I'm going to leave. Because here's the thing, it's like we'd ask a question of like, why do you need to move? But what we would do is put answers that we had heard from all the interviews. And then we'd say, okay, well, why do you want a new house? And we put answers that we heard in the interview. And you start to realize like people are like, yeah, I don't want to admit that I want, bedrooms for everyone, or I don't want to admit these things. And then finally go like, that's what I want. Like, okay. And they come back. And then, at some point in time, it's helping them prepare themselves to change. That's really what we're trying to do. This is what the interesting part is. Like, I built homes, but in building homes, I finally realized I'm not a builder. I'm a mover. I help people move from one house to another house. I happen to help build the house they're going to. But in the end, I found out like I had other people who could buy the houses of the people who were buying my houses. And I did 500 used homes on top of, 1,000 new homes, right? Because at some point I could actually figure out how to help people move. So that if they couldn't buy mine, they might be able to buy one of the people who are buying one of my houses to help them move faster. So this is where like it's all products do services. This is what most people don't understand. They think product is about standardizing. And when I standardize it, that's how it's going to work. And it's like, it just doesn't.
I know we're running out of time. Rishi, one thing I want to ask you is, can you show Bob your active participation thing?
I was actually just going to open that up. I think Bob will really like that. I actually have that screen open. Bob, I'm going to show you something really interesting that Lorenzo and I are working on. So one of the principal issues that we notice, I'm going to minimize this, with product pages is that what happens is, and this is one example for a running shoe. What was happening, Bob, on their website was they realized that there were many types of buyers who were actually coming to their product page, and they wanted to talk about all of those features. They wanted to talk about the wools. They want to talk about the rubber sole, the fact that it's machine washable, blah, 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 blah. And so we ran an experiment where what we did was when you came to the product page, we showed you a basic description. And then we just asked you like, hey, which of these features do you care about the most? Because we realized that not everyone cared about the same features. And people would make these selections, like they could select these 3 things. And then they would, when they click on the reveal button, the product description was reformulated to only talk about those 3 things. And so it obviously had a big impact on conversion rates, but we were trying to mimic what a salesperson would do in a store. And we are applying to the product page. So instead of having the product page say the exact same thing to everyone at scale, we're having the product page actually give a different story depending on your context.
Yep. Brilliant. It's brilliant. So here's the thing is most people don't understand that when they actually put all the features on the thing, people go like, yeah, but I don't want these 8 things. So I want it for cheaper. So when you actually overpromise too many things, it's like, yeah, but if I don't want those things, then I don't feel like I should pay it. So when you actually tune it to their level and only give them the 5 features that they're really interested in because of the context they're in, next thing you know, it's like, oh my God, this is perfect. It's amazing. I'll pay full price. And so we end up discounting because marketers tend up overloading the feature set and people discounting for the features they don't want. So
that's
the reason
exactly
why
right. I'm just going to share with you one more theoretical. This is something we also think is very interesting. This is a kind of an example, a made-up example for a juicer. And normally you have, a normal product description. But what we realized was that if someone is buying a juicer, again, this is all been inspired by you, Bob. I just want to be clear about that. So the idea is that they have a context. Now, someone might be, like you said, someone might be buying a juicer because they already have this model. They're buying a new model. They're renewing. That's a whole different use case. Someone might be buying a juicer because they know a lot about juicing, but someone may
Yes.
be buying a juicer because they're overweight and they want a healthy, they want a
Yep.
healthy device, and
Exactly.
they don't have context. And so our idea is to have a description, but then we say, hey, pick an option that fits you. I'm new to juicing. I'm a juicer, but new to your brand. I'm a juicing nerd, but new to your brand. And the idea is that based on that selection.
So
Yeah,
here's the
go
thing
ahead.
is first of all, I'm new to juicing, right? If they click that, you should actually then tell a story about somebody who is new to juicing and how it helped change their life, right? And that's like, I'm a juicer, but I'm new to your brand. It's like, I'm a juicer, but I feel like my old juicer is not good enough. Like like the new to your brand doesn't matter, right?
Well,
It's
it
more,
matters in the sense, Bob, that if I've never bought from Nike before, then I need to get over that hump of buying from that company.
I don't believe that. This is the thing
Ah.
is we think the brand is bigger than everything else. The brand is the shorthand and the brand is an effect. It's not a cause. And so to me, it's more about like, because if they had their juicer, it would be like, well, I would just buy another juicer of the same one. It's like, no, I have a juicer and my old one's not working. Because if they're not in that case, they would have bought a new one already. So the new to your brand is implied by the fact that the old one's not good enough.
I see.
And so this is where again, you got to like, they're not going like, oh, I want to like write it in their terms, write it like they would say it, or write it like they would think it. They don't think like, ooh, I have a juicer, but like, I want a new brand, or I need it. Like, it's like literally what's wrong with your, so my thing is if I click that one, it's like, what's wrong with your old juicer? What are the things you're juicing? Like I could ask him a whole bunch of set of questions that are very different than I'm new to juicing. Like, what did you hear about juicing? Why do you think juicing, what do you think juicing is going to do for you? Like all this other stuff. And so I think I call this the reference point. What is the reference point by which people are assessing value? Right. And so the reference point here is like, if I've never juiced, it's like, okay, I'm starting from nothing. But if I've juiced before, I'm starting with something, but there's something wrong with my juicer that says there different value proposition.
Yeah, and I think the bigger point we're trying to make over, you're right. This version that we're showing you is certainly needs more improvement. But I kind of think about the alternative, which is a product page that is giving the same description no matter what the context is, which is what's happening right now.
But this is like, how do I decide? Like, this is the craziest part is like, how do then people decide to buy it? 9 times out of 10, they look at reviews. They look at the bad reviews. Like they're actually using other things besides the copy to figure it out. And what's so interesting is I've spent so much time looking at reviews and the review process. And most reviews are actually for a mistake in the ordering process somewhere, or them buying it for a wrong situation. And so when you look at the 1s and 2s, most people go and they think most of the 5s are planted, and the 1s and 2s, they're just checking to make sure that the context by which they're complaining about it isn't them.
Yeah, one thing I want to mention about reviews, I leverage customer reviews as a voice of the customer every day to understand more about customers. Like obviously Jobs to Be Done is it's interview-based type of customer. While on the other side, I do customer reviews to understand and unpack the motivations, the anxiety. And what's interesting about that the first time I came across that, I literally just finished listening to you talking about Jobs to Be Done for 2-3 hours. And I had that recency bias. And for the first time, I was reading the reviews with the hat of the Jobs to Be Done rather than the consumer hat. And I was like, whoa, my brain completely exploded.
Yeah, you see completely different things. So it's like your reference point in reading the review is the product. But if your reference point is a person, you start to realize like, oh, they're complaining about the ordering product. They're complaining about, they said it would be here Tuesday and it didn't get here till Friday. It's like, I don't give a crap about that. Okay, good. You start to realize, what are they really upset about? And so part of this is one of the products. So the cool part about where I'm at in my life is now I'm people are pulling me in to help with product. I get to do product again. So one of the products I'm working on right now is how do we actually build a contextual review creator? So how do I actually ask you about something that you want to review? And I'm just going to ask you questions and it will build the paragraph that you cut and paste in. Right. And so part of this is to realize like at some point, because then we can actually tag and filter. It's like, this is an execution problem, or this is actually a fit problem, or and so we can start to see it, but it helps people like there are a lot of people who want to write reviews, but they don't because it's just, I don't know what to say. So if we can actually create a review starter, it will help generate better reviews for people and help, because I feel like the way some of the marketing realm has done is they just go hire people to review it. And they're always going to say positive things, but how do we get real people to do real reviews about how it fits in their life and talk about the strengths and the weaknesses, like how it fit and didn't fit, like, because everybody has to make trade-offs. And so can we actually get them to articulate the trade-offs they made as they made the purchase?
Yeah, and one thing I think about reviews, you were talking about looking at reviews in order to make a purchase. But I think reviews is also like a customer research tool that allows the marketers to understand more. And the way I think about the way people collect reviews, they think about just the company with the company glasses, right? They don't think about, okay, I want customers to talk about X, Y, and Z type of topics in the reviews because those topics, A, help the customers make a decision by going through the reviews, but also help the company learn more about why customers make decisions. Because the way companies right now collect reviews, they're not helpful to understand how people make decisions.
But this is, so there's two things I want to, like, I'll give you a counter to that, right? I don't want them to say what I want them to say. I want them to say what they mean. Right? This is where we think we can manipulate the message. And what I would say is the more authentic we can make the message, people can actually depict that. So my thing is, and most people want to manage brand equity and say, here's what we are. But the fact is brand equity is what you are in somebody's head. So I would much rather have what their reviews reflect what our true brand equity is, as opposed to try to force them to say the things I want them to say. And I'm not saying you said that, but that's the way I heard it.
For me, it's like, because right now, most of the companies send out the collect review email where the classic text is, what do you think about our product? Like, leave us a review about the product, right?
Yep.
While what if you start collecting information that are important in decision-making process of the user, right? Those information, A, helps other customers go about the decision making, right? Because they read those information on the product page, and then they help the company collect information about the way people make decisions at scale.
But see, this is the thing is part of it is most people do a review after you've bought the product. My thing is why not do something up front to basically understand their situation and the outcomes they seek? And so, by the way, and then once they buy the product, connect the context and outcome they were in to the results they got. So then you actually now say, hey, I'm in this situation. I was thinking about this. I bought this product. Oh my God, it did all these things. And I got to these outcomes. So all of a sudden, now I can actually talk about the entire experience as opposed to just talking about, it was brown, but it wasn't the color brown I wanted. Like, okay. But like in the big picture of things, it did 98% of the other things. And though most people will actually still give it a 2 because it wasn't the brown that they saw on their screen.
It's almost like collecting reviews at different stages of the timeline.
Exactly. That's what we're doing.
Cool.
That's what we're trying. And you're trying to connect space and time on this one, because and the other part is you have to realize the questions and the way you're asking it are actually educating them about how your product fits in their life. And what we keep trying to do is convince them that they need this feature when the context actually is the thing that makes them need this feature. This is where people confuse correlation and causation all the time. Right? It's just I can get on a soapbox about that one forever, because it's like I feel like I was taught, like I went to school as an electrical engineer and learned radar systems and how to triangulate and see things. And so understanding that there's a very big difference between causation and correlation. And most people think if it correlates, it's causal, and it's just not.
Cool, Rishi.
I think this is wonderful. Thank you, Bob, so much for being on this call with us and sharing your insights and wisdom. Thank you so much.
So I would love to come back and talk about, so I wrote a book now called Learning to Build, and it's the 5 skills of innovators and entrepreneurs. And I would love to riff with you guys about how this is not for innovators and entrepreneurs, but also for marketers. So as you guys read that book, I would love to be able to kind of talk about kind of like to twist it up and kind of like, I wrote it primarily because that's what I do. I build things, and I help people build things, and I do it mostly for entrepreneurs and kind of corporate innovators. But like, I would be really interested to say, if we were to twist this thing around or mash it up, do a mashup, like with marketing, how would I change these words, or what am I missing from these 5 skills? Because I think, like, I don't think these are the be all to end all 5 skills, but these are, when I see super entrepreneurs and super innovators, like, they have these 5 skills. They're just, they're made, like, I can count on them. And even if any one person doesn't have all of them, the team has the set. And that's the most important part.
We obviously would love to have you back.
So I just invite, like my wife would say, like, you just invited yourself back. That's just not a good thing. I'm like, and I always tell her, if I don't ask, I don't get. So why not?
You are always welcome. We're honored to have you, Bob. You're the most generous person we know. We've learned, we've stolen almost everything you've taught us. So I apologize, but this is
no, you didn't. Here's the thing: is if you think you stole it from me, then I stole a lot of this from these guys, and I didn't steal it from them. They gave it to me, and so you have to realize, like, I'm giving this to you, and what I want to know is, I want to know what you're doing with it. I want to know how you're making it better. I want to know how you're when we I want to have an argument where you're gonna say, no, I think it's this. No, I think it's that. And let's be clear, I'm not right. I don't know. And so part of this is, the argument is what actually helps us make it better. And so I would really appreciate kind of the pushback of, like, this doesn't make sense, or this I think is wrong. It really should be that. And that's how we go from kind of being a mentor, a mentee situation, to being peers, because we can challenge each other about our thinking, and we're not, the ego's not involved anymore. Yeah. So that's where I want to, like, at some point, enough that we're peers more than we are mentor mentee.
Well, thank you for everything, Bob. We will be in touch with you, and thank you for your generosity and for everything you've given to the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Bye. Yep.
Thank you.